Well, today we're going to talk that very concept of relationships. We've got Todd Pearage. And if you guys don't know Todd, he's been a part of a ton of these network conversations with us. He's a face you probably recognize from the Zoom calls. Todd is a part of Standing Stone Ministries, has been doing youth ministry for over 20 years and knows this world and knows the importance of relationships and caring for those that are struggling in ministry, that have been having hard times, and walking alongside with encouragement and building them up. And with that in mind, as we talk to Todd and set this up, it's only right that we have a conversation about relationships through relationships that have already been had. So Todd has brought with him Derry Prenkert, and I just messed that up. We talked about it, and I even said it wrong again. Prenkert. I can't talk, and I stumbled over my own words. But Derry and Todd are here to talk about their relationship and how's that built in their ministries. And so I'm going to hand it over to them for the conversation today.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for having us back on. Just always enjoy the conversations with you guys, and looking forward to hanging today. I want to start by just real quick sharing a kind of a statistic that I know, statistics, about how many of them are made up, and you could do a lot of things with statistics, but this one really kind of hit hard. And as I've shared it, people have kind of like gone, yeah, I feel like that's true. And it's this: 70% of pastors admit to not having a close friend, right? Like, so that's the kind of the statistic that really kind of makes us just pause. So I thought, today, as we just kind of start, as we have this conversation about friendships, to kind of start there, and to and not go around and ask, do you guys all have close friendships? Some of you have said there's people that you can call, but do you have what you would consider, what others would consider close friends? But I'm very thankful for my friendships with some of you, even on this call, and then of course with Derry. And so just real quick, Derry, do you remember, when and where we first met?
Yeah, actually, I do. And it's interesting, Todd. I was just thinking how we're going to talk about close friendships, and we've been friends for 7 years, and we've probably spent less than a collective month together in person,
Right.
Which is just wild, right? But it was 2016. I knew of this guy, Todd, because I'd played some of his games. I played a Name That Candy Bar game, and I show up to this conference in California, Download Youth Ministry, first ever DYM 100 conference, just to turn 40. And for any youth workers who've turned 40, the midlife crisis on steroids that 40 can be, and wondering, do I still have a place? I'm feeling alone. So much. Same community, youth pastored for 20 some years, but just wondering if I should keep going. And I can go to the spot, man, at Mariners Church in the youth area, this glass door that kind of heads over to the main campus, and we start talking. And not only do I realize, oh, I kind of like this guy, I realize there's some overlap, not perfect overlap, but enough overlap to our story where we just began to share there. And within, I don't know when it was in that weekend. I mean, we were even talking through some of the stuff we were walking through, and that started something that's become incredible, that's moved into, obviously we're partners in a ministry that we work in together, and that really, I jumped into it because I trusted my friend first and foremost, and it was more of a conversation with the guy. So yeah, I remember that vividly, and it's just kind of fun to recount how that's worked and the ways that's worked over our time.
Yeah, no, and like I said, just so thankful for you, and just how much you've meant to me, and how oftentimes we've leaned into each other over the years. Also thankful for the plug on the candy bar game. That's namethatcandybar.com.
Yep.
No, I'm just kidding. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. But hey, Derry, we actually were we had a call the other day where we were talking about some other stuff. One of the things was actually this call, and but it was, I think we, said maybe 30, 45 minutes, and we end up being on a Zoom together for like 3 hours, which was, we both kind of stopped and went, wait, what time is it? While we were talking, you did share about just kind of something that you kind of learned in some of these conversations with some former students. So can you just kind of unpack that again a little bit for us?
Yeah. And I'll say this, like, in case anybody doesn't quite understand what Todd and I do, we Standing Stone really just exists to shepherd shepherds. That's the heartbeat. Free and confidential conversations with ministry leaders at the risk of leaving early, and it comes in a lot of forms. And we were just talking about the loneliness of ministry, and I was thinking about it, and I reflected back during my time as a youth pastor, especially after a while. And I think anybody that's been a youth pastor can identify this. After about 10, 12 years, you really start caring about what happens to your graduates, because it's hard, but in the midst of it, every time a group graduates, you got another group you got to focus in on, and then you're like, man, how do I stay with them? So I was carving out time to go and meet with students on their college campus. I just was allowed the space where I could do it. And yearly, I would, in the first couple months, just go grab a meal, ask them a few questions. And at the heart of it was just be a check-in on how are you going. And a trend rose up that was just super fascinating. It was basically this, the connection of how well they were doing or how well they were not doing was tied to one central theme. Because I could hear it one of two ways. I say, so how's it going? And a student go, it's terrible. I mean, I love my classes. This campus is amazing. I have all these horrific or these terrific things that I'm doing. The food's awesome, blah, blah, blah. And then there'd be others say, it's going really well. I mean, my classes are terrible. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. And you know what the difference would be? The one who is struggling, the way they'd end it would say, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody. I'm not making any connections. And then the one that's saying all this miserable stuff would end it go, all this stuff is terrible, but my roommate and I are just clicked beyond belief. Or I found this club, a crew, a InterVarsity, a Navigators, and that is causing me to be in a great spot. And what we began to realize was this correlation and to finding connection and being able to work through issues versus living in isolation, all the issues getting amplified. And the phrase we even used with college students or high school students that were heading to college was healthy spiritual community can cover a multitude of issues. Little or no spiritual community will only amplify issues. And what's really interesting is over these past few years, as I've moved from that ministry now to working with ministry leaders, I am more confident of that reality with youth pastors and ministry leaders in general, that isolation significantly amplifies issues. And Todd, like we work a lot with that. We were talking, even as we were talking with some of the guys here just yesterday in preparation for this call. If you haven't seen the Barna research that came out kind of just post-COVID, but in the midst of COVID, where it said 42% of pastors had seriously considered leaving the ministry in 2020. And they identified 5 different stressors. I'm going to see if I can throw it into the chat that they said were a part of why they considered leaving. The top 5 were, the highest one was immense stress of the job. The second was, I feel lonely and isolated. The third, and there's a big gap between 1 and 2. The third was current political divisions. The fourth was the effect on the family. And the fifth was, I'm just not optimistic about the future of my church. I don't know about you, Todd, but I would argue that even though loneliness shows up second, it is the common theme in the most big crisis situations. And then that stress is another one. And what strikes me with that is when I think of that theologically and biblically, which is the one that is just completely unacceptable theologically, and which is the one that is a reality. I would say Jesus made it pretty clear that if we're going to follow him, there'll be stress. You know, in this world you'll have trouble. So we, if we want to be in ministry, we kind of have to recognize that one of that big reasons that people are considering leaving, that's going to be a part of it. But I feel lonely and isolated, I would say just the opposite. The first crisis of mankind, God looked down and said it was good, it was good, it was good. The first time he said it wasn't good, he said it is not good for man to be alone. And so I just think it's such a significant reality, and it only makes sense that an enemy would want to attack and get us isolated and lonely. So I think like that's the big thing, is stress isn't necessarily bad in ministry, but loneliness is. And Todd, I would say that's a big part of where our heartbeats lie. But also, I don't know if you would agree with this, I would say I'm able to still be going in this because I've been able to do not just do ministry, but do life with people. And I think you even had some great thoughts on that. So why don't you take it?
Well, I think one of the things you said is just so profound in the sense of the ministry context we find ourselves in. It's going to be so different, and talk to so many different people that I realized, kind of early on, and I'm thankful that he's here. That thanks to Travis Deans, that I needed a network, right? I needed those kind of friendships because the context I was serving in, I was young, married, a baby, and my senior pastor was like mid to late 60s, grandkids, on the path to retirement. We just didn't have a lot in common. We weren't friends. We didn't go out and hang out together. And everything you just said, when you just kind of layer it on top of ministry, that ministry is really difficult. But if we don't have those friendships, it can kind of make us bail on a place faster than it normally would, or could, just kind of cause it, just the heartache and the stress just compounds when we don't have kind of some of those outlets, or even just someone to sit with and just laugh and go like, that's the most ridiculous thing. Like, he wants me to bring in a ventriloquist for Vacation Bible School. Like, to have someone like just laugh with that and just go like, it's really silly, but that's what he wants to do. And so that's what I have to do. And so I'm thankful that like I met Travis, Travis kind of course corrected my misunderstandings on what networks were. I've shared this before, that I really early on was kind of taught or explained that networks was kind of this idea of getting the things that you need from people who have them. And I was like, that just sounds like manipulation. Like, I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah. And then really it was more of this, like, it's just really great to sit with people who are in a same kind of context that you are, right? They're doing the same things you're doing. And so for years, I feel like those of you in this call, that you've lived this idea of, don't do youth ministry alone, right? Like, that's been this mantra I've heard so many different times. And I'm in on that. Like, I totally, like, I'm a product of that. Like, I would not even want to do ministry by myself. And the just people that we talk to, Derry and I, sometimes we get to be that person, because wherever they're at, they don't have a network that exists, or one that is healthy, or that they feel comfortable in. And sometimes we just get to be the friend, right? We just get to be that person. And the more I've done this, I've realized that I don't want to scrap the idea of don't do youth ministry alone, but I wanted to add a second one, which is don't do life alone. And I realized that there's a difference between sitting with someone and saying, yeah, my senior pastor wants me to get a ventriloquist for Vacation Bible School, and I had this whole other idea, and now and wrestling with a ministry issue, that there's that, and then there's hey, my kids are really struggling, or my wife and I are not doing great, or I'm just really tired, or even a conflict within the church, that it really, the idea of ministry, don't do ministry alone, 100% in on that. But the second layer, maybe second level of that, is don't do life alone. Mm-hmm. And as we started talking about that, it's like, okay, so how do we get to that point? And my guess is, and either the people we shared who had meaningful impact, or as we look over our friendships, even up until today, there's a moment where we go, oh, that friendship went from like here, this kind of surface level, to, oh, that just went here. And that's a significant friend now. That's a and it's so funny. Like, I'm totally going to date myself on this, and I'm fine with it. But back when I was in college, I worked at a Blockbuster Video. Still one of my favorite jobs to this day. Like, I was a movie guy. I loved Friday nights of Blockbuster Video, people coming in looking for the new releases. It was like my favorite thing. But anyway, but I remember one night doing inventory with a guy who was the store manager, and we were like casual friends, right? Like, again, it's kind of surfacey friends. We loved movies. We talked about that all the time. When we worked together, it was constant laughing and talking. But as we did inventory one night, he started sharing with me about he and his girlfriend were not doing well. They were struggling. And he was asking my advice and my input on, and I remember in that moment going, oh, like, our friendship just hit a new level. And the reality is, he's somebody that I still talk to today, all these years later. And so it's one of those things that I'm going, okay, so the network serves as kind of the kind of the table, right? It sets the table and brings people in. And that's kind of the don't do ministry alone. I have kind of almost a forced group that I can do now ministry together with. I can bounce ideas off. I can hear what they're doing. I can pray for them. They can pray for me. But is there anyone around this table that I need to just call and just talk, and just the two of us grab coffee? Like, who around that table can be like that next level friend? And so one of the things that I know, we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, but just kind of like, how do you get to that point? Right. Like, and as I've gone back, I've looked at some of those stories. Oftentimes there's just kind of a moment where it's like, oh, it just clicked. Right. And I'll kind of just share another one. The two guys that's called, maybe I shouldn't do it. But like Mark and Travis, when we met, like the first time I met Mark, he was giving Travis such a hard time about that he was going to be a better friend to me than Travis is. Which is that's a big ask, right? Like Travis is a great friend. And it was like, you just click and you go, oh man. And today, like, Mark is one of those guys that at times I've just called up and said, hey, can you pray for this? Or can I just talk to you? And there's a kind of a moment where you almost have to take the risk, right? Like, you have to, it's like almost like that significant other that you like and you're friends, but you want to take it to another place that there might be an awkward moment, but you kind of have to risk it. So I just wanted to kind of throw out that idea of don't do ministry alone, but don't do life alone. And what does that look like for us and for our network and for network leaders to foster kind of an environment to allow people there to go to that next level?
Yeah, that's good, Todd. I was thinking about a couple things. One, I vividly remember standing at Blockbuster at the return box when there was all the copies were out, and I just watched to see if I could get one, and just hoping that when that person was bringing it back in, it would be that one movie. So thank you for that memory. And then, but second, you also are like stirring up kind of memories of those moments. Like I love that picture of, oh, we just went there. Like we just went to that next level. And I wonder, I can think of those on a lot of layers. I wonder how many youth pastors can say, I remember when that happened with another youth pastor, because I think that's a part of this. Like, let's just be you said it really well, but there's the side of my own staff relationship. There's also just inside the church. Like, I remember my wife and I were with a call like this, and they were talking like, how have you experienced community? The question was, so what does community look like inside your church? Like really good, safe community. And Janelle and I just kind of looked at each other and we're like, I don't know. Can you tell us when you find it? And that's like from a healthy church. Like we had a healthy church background. We really value. It wasn't out of hurt. It was just every time we would sit in a circle at our church, if anything was organized with the church, it was kind of twofold. One was there was this immediate, oh, the pastors and his wife are here. Let's put on a front, is what we felt like we'd get. Or anytime anything was talked about, it was like everybody just looked to us, whether we were there as the official leader or not. And we're just like, can we just be here? And I literally was on a Zoom call with a youth pastor who expressed the same thing. Like, I'm just dying every time I'm inside the church, sitting in a circle. I don't want to lead. I just want to be there. What's that look like? And so we get to create that space. And so I'm just saying that to keep in mind too. I mean, why it's so important and why a lot of us right now I'm looking at on this call, we get to facilitate the spaces for that to happen. And what are we doing? And then I'll throw out a memory. One of the best networks I was ever a part of here in Northern Indiana was a group of us that got together at the Pagoda Inn. It was a Chinese restaurant. Isn't it always? Chinese restaurant where we would meet every other Thursday. And there was a guy named Redford who was there. Redford was the elder statesman of the group. And he kind of helped organize it with some others. And I think it was maybe a year and a half, if not 2 years, where anytime anybody would start talking strategies, ideas on ministry, numbers, he would literally he'd like slam his hand, he'd say, "Shut up, guys, shut up. Not allowed. No. We can talk about our marriages. We can talk about our hobbies. We can talk about what's going on inside of our ministries. That's fine. But the minute we start planning stuff, I'm out. And that's not what we need." And I'll tell you, the brotherhood, sisterhood that grew outside of that time, what's really interesting is a long-standing spring break trip did form eventually. A long-standing see you at the pole rally, the community-wide where the high school would let all the schools gather, formed out of that. But it was rooted in relationship and friendship. And so we get to play that. So Todd, I've kind of like jumped into a little bit of practical tips and you have too, but we talked about some key questions that we should consider. And I think one would be, there's two parties as we're having this conversation. There are those of us that are lonely and saying, I just need some connection. I'm that statistic. I don't have a close friend. What to do? But then there's those of us that we have a heart for the lonely people. And what do we do? What do we do to facilitate that? And I think we just kind of landed on two key questions. One would be just this: if you're the lonely person, the question is, well, who listens to you? Who is it that listens to you? If you could answer that question and say, oh, I know right away who it is that I know, I come, I talk, they're going to listen. Then that's probably a good sign of whether or not you're in a good space with this loneliness thing. But then for the network or the one that's there, the question is like, who are you making yourself available to listen to? And so with that in mind, Todd, I don't know if we want to just throw out a couple of thoughts with that before we kind of close this up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, and it's one of those things that you kind of like, when you hear those questions, you're kind of like immediately, you know, which one you are, right? And I do think it's not the quick answer. I think to go to those deeper friendships, you really kind of have to go, okay, who really does listen to me? And who do I feel comfortable? I have been blown away by two of the phrases I hear so much since we've started this new role. One is I'm sorry for rambling, right? I hear that all the time. And I every time stop them and say, no, you have to ramble, because it's often in the rambling is where I really kind of hear something that we need to unpack, right? And so I'm listening, like, tell me what's going on, right? Like, ramble, feel free. I'm one of the safest people you can ramble to. And that one, and then the second one is just this kind of like, thank you for listening to me, right? Thank you for just being on this call. There was one guy, and just to real quick, just to share, going through something that really kind of shook me to my core, and I felt like he really held it together for the call, but it was at the end where I heard his voice crack, and I just was like, it broke me, right? Where he was like, I can't thank you enough for just the time that you've spent on the call. You don't even know me. Like, why would you a complete stranger in another state want to hear my story. And I just feel, again, to me, it's like we are more conditioned to those two things. I feel are more natural for us. I'm sorry for rambling. And that thank you for, like, I don't really have someone that I could just talk to. And so I do think that kind of, thinking through some of those practical listening skills, what are some of those tools that might need a little bit of sharpening? Am I easily distracted? I feel I'm really good one-on-one. I'm better on a Zoom, and I'm on the phone. I can struggle, right? I can find my mind drifting because I'm not sitting knee to knee, eye to eye. And so when I'm on a phone call, I know I really have to be really intentional about listening. And so for those of you like who to go, okay, so who's like that in my life that I know I can call them and I don't have to apologize for rambling, right? And I just know that they're going to be there to listen. And then we should be developing and kind of seeking out some of those skills for ourselves. When we sit around those tables at those local networks, Derry, you mentioned when somebody asks a theological question in a small group and everyone turns, to one of us or to the pastor, nobody's asking a question and turning to us, but I think they walk through the door and they're looking like, oh, I need a friend, right? And the natural one is to look to us because we sent out the email inviting them to the network and we sent out the reminder. And so our antenna's up that we're like, oh, that person, I think they need someone. I think they might need hey, can we just go grab coffee, just the two of us, and initiate some of those one-on-one, maybe awkward conversations that are going to come afterwards.
Yeah. Hey, Derry and Todd, I'm going to jump in here just because I think it's good for us to kind of maybe break into a couple groups and really like dig into this, because what you guys have been sharing, there's like so much gold in that. And I know people will watch this later as well, but just the idea, like there's so many things, but Derry, when you're talking about just rooted in relationships, I mean, I want to be the old guy at the table that slaps his hands down and say, hey, we're not talking about that right now, but if we're going to talk about this, so good. And then Todd, as you were talking about, just how we get so wrapped up talking about ministry and those ministry relationships, but then life relationships. So I think Phil's going to move us in. Here's the questions. And will you post them, Phil? Put them somewhere so we can see them? Yes? Okay. So he's going to move us into groups. We'll talk about it, then we'll come back and we'll learn from one another. But Derry and Todd, thanks, man. So good. So good.
Feel free to pause the video here and think through these questions yourself, or with the group that you're viewing this with. When you're ready, unpause to hear more of the conversation and the takeaways from the youth workers that joined us live.
So let's chat just a little bit about what took place, because I think there was 3 different breakout rooms about going from ministry friendships to life friendships. Who listens to you? Who do you listen to? What was some of your conversations?
Isaac just hit a home run with his comment near the end. We talked about meeting together face to face and being together on Zoom, and he said it's better to go from life to Zoom than from Zoom to life. Isn't that the way you put it, Isaac?
Yeah, at least the way that
was
I
at least a
understand
triple. That was at least a triple, if not a home run.
Yeah, dude, that's really, really good.
Yeah, Isaac, unpack that. Tell me about it.
I just think like with some of you guys, I think if I were to spend time with you guys in real life first versus then coming to Zoom and just meeting you guys this way, if you're looking for that transparency and vulnerability and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be a little scarier for me to do it this way versus if I did spend time in real life for a few days or whatever. So I just think in our digital world, we're going in reverse too many times. We're starting Zoom and then going to real life, where I think for me, at least, like I said, there's something about being in the same room with a person, eating a meal together, you know, praying together, all that kind of stuff, doing that first, and then kind of, because of distance and time and restraints and things like that, then you go to Zoom. Kind of what I think.
Yeah, you know, to add to that, Isaac, I think also whenever we invite a new youth leader into our network, it's easier to go from a conversation one-on-one into the group than it is to bring that new person right into the group.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I've got
Really?
a question for Travis Deans. How are you best friends with everybody?
Yeah, Travis, how are you best friends with everyone?
Oh, there's a few people that hate me. Trust me.
But seriously, Travis, you seem to have that ability to connect well with everybody. What are some practices that you do to make that happen?
Well, I'll be honest. That sort of flows out of one of my weaknesses as a person, because, you know, part of one of my coping mechanisms that I didn't know I had was, hey, don't make people mad, just be friendly with everybody. And so one of the downsides that I always have to watch out for is, you know, it's really easy for me to get along with people, more difficult to address issues that need addressed, that problems that need talked about, have difficult conversations. So while it appears to be a strength, and it is, I enjoy relationships. I enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy just getting to know new people. The downsides to that are I can tend to be a mile wide and an inch deep, or, you know, I can tend to be you know, a people pleaser and not a good conflict resolution person. So there's an upside and a downside to that for sure. But I don't know. God has I don't know. God has. My dad was that way. He was a salesman, and he loved connecting with people. He loved people, and I think I got some of that from him. But
that's really interesting, Travis, because, like, you know, how do you build a relationship where it's strong enough to go there and to speak truth?
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a broken home and have some abandonment issues. I'm always afraid to go to the truth that I need to say, because I don't want, you know, somebody to walk out on me. And so, like, how do you develop a relationship that's deep enough that you're allowed to speak in truth? You know, maybe back to the trust thing. There's enough trust in this relationship that I can say what needs to be said. That person's not going to walk out, because I can definitely relate to what you're saying.
Well, I mean, I have found that people that I work with, I tend to, you know, I work with someone long enough, I tend to want to go deeper in relationship. And I don't know if it's, you know, the thing of, you know, like guys in the military, you know, you're in the trenches together, right? You're taking fire together. There's something about that for me that helps me to open up and be more honest and vulnerable. And you know, so it's I don't know. I find I need to take a side door approach to vulnerability with people. A lot of times I sitting in a circle face to face, talking about what's going on, that intimidates the heck out of me. Like C3 calls with Doug Clark, man, they scare me.
You know, taking advantage of Todd.
I'm pretty scary.
Our time kind of wrapping up here. We'll stick on them afterwards, but Todd, you seem to be somebody who can go there. That you not only have a relationship with people, but you you speak hard truth the times I've been around you, and you don't mind going there. How do you do that? Why do you do it? How can we do it? How can we learn from you? Because you're not afraid to go there. So maybe unpack it a little bit or help us.
I don't know. I think that's really interesting that you say that, and I, like, even as Travis was talking, like, there were just, I think it was like in the spring, Travis and I were talking about something, and I just felt like I felt like I needed to push a little bit, and for me it was, I knew I was taking a risk, right? Because I was like, I'm just going to step into this, and so I think if there's, when I kind of look at the way, for me, I feel like I do it really cautiously, and it's really interesting because I'm like, I was actually told at one point that, like, that kind of is like bringing negative energy to a conversation, where some people just like say it, right? And it's like, but I kind of massage it and like, oh, can we talk about this? And I almost like slowly get into it, and just and if I feel like a really strong resistance, I feel like at that point I can, like, I can back away. And if I feel like they're open to the conversation, then then let's keep going. And so maybe if there's there, but I do know when it gets pushed back, I know I personally really struggle with that in a sense of, and I think probably some of it is like I'm a 2 on the Enneagram. So the motive behind it is probably like, it's just a genuine willingness, like, to want to help, right? And what I know is that sometimes people don't want that help, and as a 2, that's really difficult, right? Like when that's pushed back on, it's like, well, that's what I'm about, and it's like, no, we don't want that. And so I do know that it's a personal struggle. So it's kind of honestly, on some level, amazing to hear you say that it's something you see that is good in me, and I'm super encouraged. It might be worth, I mean, not saying this wasn't worth my time, but that is, I'll probably process that and overthink that for the rest of the day. Just kind of trying to think that, because it's something that I want to be good at. I don't love conflict, and I think that might be another reason why. But if the conversation, I feel like if I feel like it really needs to happen, that it most likely, the conversation that you would have with me has been replayed in my mind over 100 times.
So this is one of those network conversations that, like, we don't want it to end. We want it to go on. And so, but we're going to honor everybody's time. We're going to end it. And then for all those people that are going to watch this later, they're just not going to get on the best part, because after we close it, if you got time, we'll stick around and talk, because I want to hear some of Derry's thoughts as well. But I think Josiah and Kevin are going to tee us up for a close.
Yeah. So this is a great conversation, everyone, because like, one of the things that I could definitely apply here is just like definitely going deeper, but even not being afraid to go deep. So I just do believe that for me, especially, that I need to work on that more. But if you want to put in what you want in the chat of how much, like, this has applied to you, like, or how this can be applied, or what you've learned today, you can put that right in the chat right now. But with that said as well, just a couple things for the next network conversation. We're going to be doing our bit developing strategy, and this is going to be with Jeff Martin. He's with FCA. He's actually the executive not executive. He's the vice president of strategic, I believe it was, for FCA. If somebody could correct me on that, that'd be fantastic. But either way, it sounds like he's going to be a really good conversation about strategy. But as well, do not miss out on our free refills podcast for this month. So again, like, yeah, just look into that, and then we can and you can learn more about developing strategies at the free refills podcast. So I will pray us out, and if you need to get going, you can click the N or the leave button if you want to stick around. You're more than happy to come. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, and we thank you and we praise you for who you are. Just thank you for this conversation today, to be vulnerable with relationships, and as well to dig deeper and go deeper into relationships. And I just am thankful for this conversation that we had today. And I just pray for the conversations ahead, that we would honor you and glorify you, what we say, what we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thanks for viewing this network conversation, brought to you by the National Network of Youth Ministries. We hope it helps you to set the table for unity and further conversations with other youth leaders. Any shared links are in the comment section on NNYM's YouTube channel. While you're there, feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to join our next conversation or training, you can find upcoming live events on our Eventbrite page. You can also connect to a local network leader at nnym.org. We're here because we are better together.